Hello aspirants, welcome to PW OnlyIAS English channel. I am here Harpreet Singh with the analysis of the Hindu from 20th September 2024. Let's begin today's analysis. The topics that I have taken for today's analysis are violence against Dalits, FATF, Ramnath Kovind report on One Nation, One Election, White Revolution 2.0, and the editorial, which deals with the Russia versus Ukraine conflict and the role of India. Let's begin with the analysis. Now, this is a very important topic, especially with respect to General Studies Paper 2, 1, and even Ethics Paper. This talks about land mafia torches at least 34 houses in Bihar's Dalit hamlet. Now, please remember, when we are talking about such instances, there is caste-based violence associated with these instances. When we talk about the Dalit community, they basically represent the scheduled caste community which we talk about, and they are one of the vulnerable sections of the Indian society. Now, studying them, analyzing them, the problems that they face, along with the various protective measures that are there, is very important for today's analysis. When we talk about the word Dalit, scheduled caste, or the word Harijan, they denote this one and the same thing. What or who are these people? See, scheduled caste form the lowest division among the caste hierarchy, often associated as among the most vulnerable sections of the society. When we talk about the Indian social structure, we see that the Indian society is divided into Varnas. Varnas, that means the various hierarchies or the various people in the various hierarchy, and for each Varna, there are duties assigned to them from the traditional basis. Let us say the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and the Shudras. These were the four Varnas. There was other people who were even kept outside the Varna system. These were the Dalit communities. And because of that, they were subjected to all sort of discrimination, which is one or the other form continuing even today. Now let us see the certain dimensions related to these vulnerable section. Now there's certain information, data that I have mentioned in the board, because analysis of this vulnerable section becomes very important. See, the scheduled caste people comprise 16.4% of the total population of India. This is according to the 2011 census, which is the latest that we have. 74% of them live in the rural areas. See, the word, when we talk about these communities, we realize that this is not something, the word, let us say, scheduled caste hasn't come after the independence. It was something that was used earlier on also. Let us see the evolution also. The Montague-Chelmsford reforms 1919 basically use the word depressed classes in order to denote these sections of societies. Simon Commission was the one which for the first time informally used the word scheduled caste. That was an informal designation. But it was the Government of India Act which basically gave or institutionalized the word scheduled caste. So my request to all of you is that whenever we are studying this vulnerable section, we need to know all the dimensions associated with them, because they can be asked, it can be asked in your papers also, what are the problems that are associated with the scheduled caste people and how to deal with them and what are the measures that are there. Now, these are certain details that are there. Now, let us move ahead and see what are the problems that the scheduled caste community are facing even today for that matter. First is untouchability. Now, if you study the caste system in India, you will realize that Indian caste system is unique. Across the world also caste-like systems are existing, but Indian caste system is unique. Among those uniqueness, untouchability is a characteristic that is associated with the caste system, in which the scheduled caste people were treated as untouchables. That means that they were treated in a position that they could not even come in contact with the higher class caste. So that is why even the way they were staying, let us say they were told to stay outside the villages. When they used to enter the villages, they were told to beat the drums, only then they can enter the villages. So a lot of discrimination has been there. That is why Article 17 of the Indian Constitution focuses primarily on abolition or any sort of practice of untouchability, right? So untouchability, even today in one or the other form, there have been instances which it is being practiced. Second is denial of basic rights. See, prior to independence, before the constitution came into force, we realized that even the scheduled caste communities were not allowed to take water from the tanks or even walk on the places or regions where the higher caste used to reside. So these problems are even existing today in certain rural regions, because the thing is 74% of the scheduled caste people are residing in the rural regions. In the rural regions, the rigidity of the caste system is even higher. So that leads to what? The discrimination that is being faced by the community even being higher. Next is social exclusion. Social exclusion means that, let us take a village as a society, itself as a society. The Dalits or the scheduled caste people were told to stay outside the village. So that means there is a systematic, or in a way, the whole village itself is excluding the certain set of people because they are not part of the Varna system. So that is one of the major problems. Even let us say when people eating together, or let us say marriages and all, we see various forms of exclusions that these scheduled caste people experience. Next is systematic inclusion. Systematic exclusion basically means when itself the system is involved in promoting the concept of discrimination. If we go to pre-independence time, we would be seeing that in the Kerala region, there was a concept of breast tax, in which the lower caste, the Dalit women, were told not to wear anything on their breast. They had to keep it naked. If they used to cover something on their body, they had to pay a tax because they belonged to a lower caste. Now, this was an extreme form of discrimination, which was during that time the court also allowed. This is a pre-independence time. So, systematic exclusion. Then is occupational discrimination. Please remember, as we were talking about the various varnas, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, according to the scriptures, every varna is designated certain duties. Now, what happens is that when the duties are assigned to other varnas, what other profession is remaining was given to the Dalit community. Now, what happens traditionally, not in the independent India, but though certain instances are seen here, what was traditionally seen is that the Dalit community could not practice any other profession which the other varnas were practicing. Now remember that constitution has completely abolished this system in a way that whatever job you want to do, it's your wish. So, but if you go to the rural regions, you still see that occupational discrimination is visible to some extent. Yes. Political discrimination, you will be realizing that even today, the people of the scheduled caste have seats reserved in the parliament and the state legislature. But you will be seeing that it is very difficult for them to win the seats from the general category, or for the seats that are not reserved for them. So we see there is caste-based politics and voting also on the basis of caste. So we see political discrimination also happening in various levels. Next, we see poverty. We realize that 36.6% of the scheduled caste people are below poverty line. Now that is a point of concern and a major issue, because what is happening is the poverty and along with the social status is overlapping, which is low in both the cases. That basically multiplies the atrocities or the problems that this community is facing. Next is demography. You will be realizing that demographic parameters also, they're facing a lot of issues. For example, the literacy rate among these scheduled caste people is merely 66%. If you take it as a whole for the complete India, it is 74%. So that means they are behind the whole country as a whole with respect to demographic parameters. So there are various issues and problems that they are facing. Now, if I take it in brief, what are the protective measures that have been there? We have various measures. Some of them are like the Protection of the Civil Rights Act 1955, the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989, and obviously we have various constitutional provisions like Article 17, Article 46, 15, Article 4, Article 16, Sub-Article 4, Article 23, Article 340, and so on and so forth. So these are the measures that have been provided, because remember one thing, that every person who is in India is an equal citizen of India. It is our duty to respect and honor everyone and end the concept of discrimination, because everyone is same in the eyes of God. Let's move ahead. Now, please understand, this is a very, very important topic which came in the newspaper with regard to FATF. Now, we'll be studying what is FATF, but let's see what this topic basically concerns. Now, FATF is basically Financial Action Task Force. This article is basically telling that FATF has recommended that India should reduce the number of trials that are related to money laundering. So there are many money laundering cases that are going on in India, and there are a lot of delays and the trial is taking a lot of time. So the FATF has recommended India that you need to bring some structural and functional changes, like increase the capacity of the court system, because the court system is very slow. And what happens is leads to delay of the trials that are going on. Along with them, they are saying to streamline the working of the enforcement directorate, and various other provisions have been recommended by the FATF. Now, these are things in a process so that the money laundering issues, or let us say money laundering funding dimensions and the problems associated with them, are resolved. A positive way forward is being recommended by FATF. But from the perspective that you are reading for civil services, it is also important to understand what FATF is. So let us understand what FATF is. Now, FATF is an intergovernmental decision-making body. It is very important when I mention intergovernmental. Now, UPSC can mention a non-governmental body. Now, please remember, it is an intergovernmental body. These are the places where UPSC can pull your leg. So, it is very important to be very careful about these particular points. It is an intergovernmental body, a decision-making body. It was established in 1989 during the G7 summit in Paris, and it has a secretariat in Paris itself. Now, what it deals with, it brings national legislative and regulatory reforms in money laundering, and it also works in stop funding for the weapons of mass destruction. So that means all the members are there that are there, and even the others also, they basically recommend that what are the legislative reforms or what are the functional and structural reforms that you need to bring in your laws so that you align with the standards of what the FATF has said. Because see, every country in one or the other way is related or suffering from some sort of money laundering or terror financing and all. So it is very important that this body basically brings about the legislative and regulatory reforms in the countries, which the countries should abide by, right? So let us see and move ahead with what are the objectives also. So FATF monitors the countries to ensure that they implement the FATF standards. So what FATF standards are with respect to what the laws, regulation should be, how the functioning should be. Like India has been recommended that your trials with respect to money laundering are getting delayed. So you need to work on them to resolve it as soon as possible. So these are the recommendations that are made, and one has to abide by them to keep up to the standards of FATF. Now, what are the objectives of FATF? Let's see that. To set standards and promote effective implementation, legal, regulatory, and operational measures for combating money laundering, terror financing, and other related threats to the integrity of the international financial system. You realize we can say in a way that it is trying to protect the integrity of the international financial system. Why? Because any terror funding or problem in one country will have its ripple effect to the other countries also, right? So if certain terror funding taking place in one region will lead to other countries also suffering, whether it is trade, whether it is terrorist infiltrating the other countries, and also all these things are interrelated. So it is very important that overall what the standards are set by FATF, the countries should abide by that, right? So this is the objective. As we move ahead, we realize that what is India and its status with FATF? Remember, in 2006, India got the observer status at FATF. In 2010, India became the 34th member of FATF. So it's very important to understand that India is a member, right? There can be questions in the UPSC itself that India has an observer status as a FATF. Now you should remember that it is a member. Clear? Now FATF has certain list. Now it categorizes the countries. Let us say some are not following these standards properly and some are complete violators. So there are lists for that also, grey list and black list. Now see, what is a grey list? Because it keeps on coming in your newspapers also, and you should have an idea. Countries that are considered safe havens for supporting terror funding and money laundering are put in the FATF, that are considered as safe havens, which are supporting indirectly the terror funding and let us say money laundering activities are put in the grey list. This inclusion basically serves as a means that the country should be cautious, because if this continues, they would be put in the blacklist, right? They would be put in the blacklist. Currently, these countries are those which directly and indirectly might be supporting terror funding or safe havens for money laundering. So it is like a warning to them. Obviously, it leads to various restrictions being imposed on them. What is blacklist? Blacklists are known as non-cooperative countries or territories, NCCTs, are put in blacklist. They support terror funding and money laundering. So a lot of restrictions would be imposed on them by various countries, because they are the countries which support terror funding, create disruption in the economy, money laundering activities. And these countries are like a very, they might not receive, let us say, funds also from the international bodies or support system. So a lot of problems would be there for the country, because they are declared as countries who are supporting directly the terror funding and money laundering. So these are the two lists which we talk about when we talk about FATF. Now let's move ahead. Now there is a word mentioned, White Revolution 2.0. Now please remember, I'm giving you a very brief idea of White Revolution 2.0. The reason behind it is that the standard operating procedure and the various dimensions associated to this White Revolution 2.0 have not yet been declared by the Government of India. As more details are disclosed, we would be taking a special session on the White Revolution 2.0 and discussing it in detail. Currently, when White Revolution 2.0 is mentioned by the Government of India, what does it basically aims at? It is an initiative to transform the dairy cooperative sector. Now, according to the Government of India, right now it has 4 components. First, it is going to empower the women farmers. Second, enhance the milk production. Third, strengthen the dairy infrastructure. And fourth, boosting export. Now, when we talk about 2.0, as we get more details about them, we will be working on them and creating a special session and a lecture on this. But before that, we need to understand, if this is 2.0, then there would be 1.0 also. So let's understand what is 1.0. 1.0 was basically, again, White Revolution 1.0, which is known as Operation Flood, which was started in 1970. Because of the success of the Green Revolution, we thought we could transform the dairy sector also. Under the leadership of Mr. Verghese Kurien, this particular White Revolution was started. The aim was to increase the milk productivity and ensure competitive market price for the milk. What were the objectives? To increase milk production, to improve rural income, and provide affordable milk to the consumers. You won't believe that this was so successful that India became the largest producer of milk in the world. So that means when we can do this, we can also achieve the goals of White Revolution 2.0. So as the more details are disclosed, we will be working on that. Excuse me. Next is with respect to the simultaneous election taking place. Please remember, I had already taken a lecture on the 16th of September. 16th September 2024 on this particular topic. Now, what I am here doing is telling you what Ramnath Kovind committee has told. I have though put the same details which I had put in the 16th of September. Just we can have a look. We had done all this. What is one nation, one election? That means a proposal of conducting the elections at Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha and the local bodies at simultaneously. This is something that we have already done. And I had told you how the election would be conducted in the 16th of September. Like, there would be 3 VVPATs and you will have to vote for the MP, MLA and the local bodies at the same time. On 16th of September, we are told that it is not a new concept. It was held in 1952 till 1967. Later disruption of the state legislative assemblies resulted in basically the cycle of synchronization breaking. We had discussed what the benefits with respect to, let us say, cost reduction, focus on long-term governance, increased voter turnout, level playing field. We had discussed efficient use of security forces and curb horse trading. On the other hand, problems, we had discussed synchronization challenges. Now, please understand, the committee report which I will discuss, which is the topic or the agenda of discussion, is how these issues are being resolved. So there is possible of synchronization challenges. We discussed that it poses a challenge to the federal issues. We have discussed with respect to biased structures. We have discussed that leads to cost implications, legal concerns, and regional parties issue, and the various articles associated with one nation, one election, and various bodies favoring the one nation, one election. Now comes the topic that we have to discuss. Please remember, what right now I discussed, I had already discussed in current affairs on the 16th of September 2024. So I would request you to please go through that if you want to go it in detail. I just put the slides so that you have a brief idea that we have covered that. Now, what is the recommendation of the Ramnath Kovind committee, which the union government has basically approved? See, this basically talks about the appointed date for the Lok Sabha. That means Article 82A would be introduced, which would bring about synchronization in the election. So that is going to be that is there going to be a constitutional amendment for that. Second, this is a proposal right now, right? Second is synchronization. Now, synchronization basically means that at the time of the next election, whether it is implemented in the coming next election or the next election, whenever it takes place, in the time of the next election for the Lok Sabha, all the state assemblies and local bodies would be dissolved, irrespective of the remaining term, as one-time measure. That means, for example, when the Lok Sabha election has to take place, whether the assembly election took place, let us say 1 year or 2 year back, and that means let us say 3 to 4 years are left. Even then also, as a one-time measure, in the next, when it is decided that the one nation, one election will take place, all the state assemblies would be dissolved and the local bodies would be dissolved, and the election will take place together as a one-time contingency measure. This is recommended by Ramnath Kovind committee. Next is hung assembly. In case, let us assume that no party, let us say supposingly a government is formed in the state and there is a no confidence motion passed against the state government. That means the government falls, the election has to take place. Now, we were aiming at the one nation, one election. That means that after 5 years only the election should take place. So what do we mean? That what would be the state of the state government in that particular state? So please understand this. Ramnath committee recommends that in case fresh election would be held with a reduced tenure. Supposingly, I'll give an example. Every year, 5 years election will take place in the union and the state. Correct? Now, supposingly, take an example of Bihar. Now, after 5 years, synchronization, based on synchronization, election at the state government and the union government and the local panchayats have taken place. Now, but in the state of Bihar, we realize that no confidence motion is passed and the government falls. Now, let us say 2 years have passed. That means 3 years was still left. So what will happen? So the committee recommends that new election will take place in the state of Bihar, but that tenure would not be of 5 years, but only 3 years, because in order to maintain a synchronization, so that the next time when the election takes place, it is again together. So the new election that takes place, the government that would be formed, that would be with a reduced tenure. This is what is the recommendation of the Ramnath Kovind committee. Clear? Let's move ahead. It also recommends a single electoral roll for the central and the state and the local election. And next is logistical requirement. Ramnath committee says, recommended to the election commission that you need to calculate what are the expenditures and other dimensions and problems that could be related to the one nation, one election that would be taking place. So we see this is being mentioned. Now, last topic is the with respect to the editorial that we have. Now, this is by a prominent political analyst, Hasini Haidar, who basically talks about India and Russia peace. Please understand what this editorial talks about. In the beginning, we see that India initially had an active stand that there should be peace with respect to Russia and Ukraine issue. But now we see a shift is being visible. Now, what that shift is, please understand. Please understand. This shift from a mere activeness to a proactiveness is being observed. How this is being observed? We realize that Prime Minister Modi visited Ukraine and met President Zelensky. On the other hand, along with it, next month, India, in Prime Minister Modi would be meeting President Putin also. So we realize that India is meeting both the countries and maintaining a diplomatic stand, and those two countries themselves are at war. Now, this provides a unique opportunity for India to what? To help or be a broker or a mediator in resolving the issue of Ukraine and Russia. Because countries like United States and all, see, they do not have very good relations with Russia. So they cannot be a mediator. A mediator can be a country which basically has good relationships with both the countries. So India can take that position and that stand. So that is why, please remember, even when Prime Minister Modi visited Ukraine, he made a call to the United States also and briefing them that this is the reason for my visit and we want to maintain a neutral stand. Now let us move ahead. What the other details with respect to the editorial are talking about. India's stand and position. Please understand. For India, both Ukraine and Russia are geopolitically and strategically important. They're very important with respect to, let us say, trade relations, let us say crude oil. Ukraine has been a major supplier for defense equipment repair. So they have very good relations. Even the medical students, Indian students have been going to Russia and Ukraine for studies. So they have very good relations, right? Now what happens is that India has followed the policy of non-alignment and strategic autonomy. Strategic autonomy and non-alignment over here basically means that when we are talking about, we are not going to simply follow a country because we are in an alliance with that country. No. Non-alignment and strategic autonomy means that our policies will be decided according to our interest. We can favor a country because our interests are important at that instance. We may not favor that country because it might be against our interest. So that is known as strategic autonomy, or autonomy with respect to my decision making or country's decision making. So that is, India follows a non-alignment and strategic autonomy so as to balance its stance based on our interest. When we move ahead, we see India is a voice of the global south, and it has proved its mettle because of holding successfully G20, showing its presence in various spheres, whether it is the African continent, whether it is the South American continent, having relationship with the European nations. So India has showed its mettle. Now the thing is that when we talk about India's stand right now, you would have realized that I had mentioned when Dr. Jaishankar had gone to Berlin, he had given a 4-point stand of what India's stand should be with respect to the Ukraine and Russia war in the previous days of my newspaper analysis. Over there, Dr. Jaishankar presented India's formal stand where he said it is not an era of war, no solution on battlefield, Russia on the table, and resolution of the conflict. Now, please understand, India's stand has been clear. In one of my previous analysis, where the Swiss peace process was involved, which is basically trying to resolve the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, India is not a party of that because that process does not involve Russia as its partner, whereas India's stand is that if you want to resolve the Russian and Ukraine conflict, Russia should be brought on the table, only then the conflict can be resolved. So that is why India is firm on its stand that the war needs to rest. The solution should be there. Along with it, Russia should be an equal stakeholder. Along with it, the conflict has to be resolved. Now what happens over here? We need to shift from the principle to metal. Principle to metal means what the Suhasini Haidar, the author, is saying that the principles are right. That means you want both the countries to resolve their issues. Now it is time, because of all the dimensions that I've discussed. Both the countries have good relationship with India. India has shown its mettle in the global sphere. It is a leader of the global south. It has its trade and economic relations with all the other parties also. It has shown its mettle that it is not part of Swiss peace process because it wants all an inclusive and holistic solution. So now is the time that India gets involved with both this nation together, be a mediator and resolve their conflict. That will show India's mettle in the global policy conflict resolution. This is what the editorial talks about. Coming back, this particular PDF would be available on my Telegram account, which is over here. You can download the PDF from this. You can just QR scan this and you can get my PDF. This was the daily analysis from The Hindu from 20th of September 2024. Hope you like the analysis. Hope you enjoy that. You learn something from it. Please remember, newspaper reading is very important and integral part of your civil services preparation. We are here to guide you and tell you how you need to understand and comprehend the newspapers. Me, Harpreet Singh, signing off from today's daily analysis. Jai Hind.